Somebody buys a house for $700,000, they put $150,000 into it, and in their head they're thinking, this is worth $850,000.
Or $900,000 or $1 million.
Yeah, and then it appraises for $800,000 and they're stunned.
And they are not wrong. They improve the property in the literal sense, but cost and value are not the same thing. Spending $150,000 does not mean you added $150,000 in value. It sometimes can mean you added $250,000 in value, and sometimes it can mean you added $50,000 in value.
The market does not care what you spent. The market cares what comparable houses are selling for.
At first, when you renovate a property, cost and value move up together. You fix a bad kitchen, value goes up. Update a gross bathroom, value goes up. But at some point, that line flattens. And after that point, you're spending more money than the market is willing to reward you for. And most people just don't know where that point is.
Most people assume their house is different. They assume buyers will appreciate what they appreciated all those years. They assume that their upgrades will stand out. But buyers are comparing your house to the other 3 houses down the street. They are not comparing it to your renovation budget.
Your neighbor sets the price, not your contractor, not your designer, not your Pinterest board. If the nicest home in your neighborhood sold for $750,000 and you're renovating your home with the assumption that you're going to sell yours for $900,000, that doesn't make any sense.
If the kitchen is nice and functional, that's what matters. Once it's already nice, going from nice to ultra luxury, that's where you stop getting paid back.
A $25,000 kitchen renovation on a dated house can add massive value. We've done that. A $90,000 kitchen renovation on an already good kitchen, that doesn't mean that you're adding $90,000 in value. Maybe you added $30,000, maybe you added $40,000, but now you're $50,000 in the hole. That gap in the middle, that's what really hurts people. You start doing that on room after room, taking $50,000 here, $50,000 loss here on every room, all of a sudden you're screwed.
And it's subtle because when you're living in it, it feels like value. It looks better, it feels custom, it feels upgraded. But resale value is not about how it feels to you. It's about how it compares to everything else available to the buyer.
I guess in a way you could kind of do it if you wanted to, but then when it comes time to sell the property and you're paying that ego tax and you start crying about the market or crying about your realtor and trying to blame other people, like that's where I start to have a problem with it.
Yeah, and look, that ego tax shows up in a lot of ways, not just in real estate. It shows up in luxury finishes that don't match the neighborhood. It shows up in oversized appliances that no one asked for. You don't need 2 ovens. It shows up in custom everything in a mid-tier house.
There's nothing wrong with nice things, but when you put a $70,000 luxury kitchen into a $600,000 home neighborhood, you could lose money. And that market does not suddenly become a luxury market just because you decided that it was going to be. You're just shrinking your margin or losing money.
Time and time again, I've watched people insist on $40,000 tile packages in houses where it just doesn't make sense. And I'll say, hey, this isn't going to move the resale needle the way you think it will. And then the answer is usually, yeah, but I want it. And that's fine. Everyone's entitled to that. Just understand that you're not investing at that point.
And that's the real shift. Once the renovation becomes, I want what I want because I want it, it's no longer about value. Call it anything else other than investing in real estate. And then don't take it personally when your realtor tells you your home isn't worth what you want it to be worth. No individual person controls the market. You don't control that.
Another place we see this constantly is convenience. People don't want to live through a renovation. Ugh. They don't want dust. Ugh. They don't want disruption. So they move out. They rent somewhere else. They double their housing costs for 3 or 4 months. That decision alone can cost thousands of dollars.
Temporary discomfort is cheaper than permanent overpayment. We've lived through renovations. We've dealt with the noise. We've dealt with the mess. We've dealt with the inconvenience. Drew's lived in 9 basements, 11 basements.
Well, I've lived in a basement for 9 years.
I just got done living with my parents for the last 10 weeks. I've lived with my in-laws. But we do that because every dollar matters and you don't want to spend unnecessarily to kill your margin. We have to protect your margin at all costs. And that's the only reason we've been able to survive in this for so long.
You have to be able to sacrifice, be willing to sacrifice for your financial future. And if it means living with your in-laws for a couple of weeks or a month, you do it. Not because you don't want to, but because you can make money. And let's not forget about change orders. That's where renovation budgets really do go to die. Halfway through a project, someone sees something on Instagram.
Oh, who was it that they had already started the renovation? They'd already gutted the entire house. All the stuff was on the floors, and they're like, "We want to change the floor color." I thought the contractor was gonna have a heart attack. He's like, he's got all of the debris and everything. He's like, wait, so I have to stop all the construction. We'll take all this stuff out of the house to stain the floors and then start the construction again.
All of these people have become one person in my mind, so I can't remember.
It's like, you don't think that's gonna cost you money? You don't think that's going to change what the initial bid was, and then they get a higher price contracting budget, and they're like, where did this money?
Not to mention, when's it going to be done? You delayed it. That's not strategic. That is pure emotion, and that is the ego tax.
And emotion, turns out, is expensive. That's really what we're trying to tell you. We're not against nice houses. We are not against upgrades. We're not against you getting what you want. We're against people pretending that emotional decisions, that I want what I want when I want it, are financial decisions, and then trying to blame other people for it.
And here's the other hard truth. Most people say they're renovating their forever home. Statistically, most people move within 5 to 7 years. Life changes, jobs change, people have kids, family members move, kids change, plans change.
Do people realize that mortgage rates are tied to the 10-year treasury? Because guess what? Banks, institutions, the government know that most people move every 10 years. That's why it's tied to the 10-year. And what happens when you renovate like you're staying forever, but you end up actually selling in 5 to 10 years? It ends up showing up. It ends up costing you money. It ends up taxing you. We call it the ego tax. And that's when people get angry. They blame the agent, they blame the market, they blame the interest rate, they blame the contractor that sold them the stuff. They blame everybody. But really, they just paid for these things in the market, and they were never promised any reimbursement. You were never guaranteed anything in this game, and so you have to operate conservatively.
And I can't even begin to tell you how many people we've seen it hurt, financially specifically, but emotionally as well, because they feel stuck. They feel buried in a house they thought that was a good investment.
Yeah, they've spent all this money. I have to get this number to get all of my money out, and then they can't sell it for that number, or they're trying to sell it because of convenience. They missed the hot market, try to sell in a soft market. All of a sudden, you're staring down the barrel of a $200,000 loss, and how could you move when that's the situation? And that's why we're talking about this right now. It's become really prevalent the last couple of years as the market has slowed down. Seeing all these people go through it, I felt like we had to say something. Consumption is not an investment, and that is how you lose money. That is how you lose flexibility. That's how you can lose everything in real estate.
And your realtor is not going to tell you not to spend that money. No one will. Anyone who benefits financially from these exchanges is not going to tell you it's a bad idea.
We would, but nobody else will. So if we're saying that there's a line where renovations stop increasing the value in the same way, and we're saying that there's an ego tax past that line, then the obvious question that I'm sure everyone is thinking to themselves is, okay, so what actually does increase the value of your home in a way that is consistent and will be rewarded by the market?
And this is the boring part. It's not exotic tile. It's not imported stone. It's not 40-inch commercial ranges in a neighborhood that definitely doesn't need it. It's basic, it's functional, and it's clean.
It's a pretty boring strategy, but it's a strategy and it's an investment, because neutral increases the buyer pool. Anything you're trying to sell, the bigger the buyer pool, the more probability that you're going to sell what you're trying to sell.
Absolutely, and layout wins. I would rather fix flow and functionality than install luxury finishes or do specific colors on walls. If the kitchen makes sense, if the storage makes sense, if the house lives well, that does more for resale than expensive surfaces or high-end appliances or a certain paint color.
And this is the part most people underestimate. Consistency wins in this. If the house feels cohesive, clean throughout, that matters. It doesn't need to be ultra high-end.
And look, we've sold multi-million-dollar houses in one of the nicest counties in the whole country. with standard 36-inch ovens. And we've sold mid-tier houses with some subway tile and quartz countertops for top dollar.
We've sold multi-million-dollar homes with quartz countertops and subway backsplashes.
Because the house fit the market, and that's the key.
You don't get paid for being any more than 1% better than your competition. You have to examine your neighborhood, you have to examine the price point, and you have to understand who the buyer in that neighborhood is going to be.
And when you stay in that lane, your margin stays intact. When you start trying to outbuild your neighborhood, that's really when you become quite a gambler and it gets really risky. If someone wants to upgrade because they love it, that's fine. Just separate lifestyle from investment, because once you confuse those two things, that's where the trouble starts.
Winning in real estate is not about having the most impressive house. It's about having the most marketable house. And those things are definitely not the same thing. At the core of all of this is that we are not special. We're not that bright. We're not the most creative. We're not the most decorative. But what we are is disciplined. And that discipline in real estate gets rewarded.
We don't pick basic because we lack imagination. We pick basic because we understand the math, we understand the markets, and we understand that restraint protects margin.
We've come close one time in not making money on a real estate deal. And it wasn't because we over renovated the house. We did the same renovation we've always done. It was because we overpaid when we bought it. And that was the mistake there. And we still broke even because we managed the renovation correctly. We stick to the budget and we really are almost, it's borderline religion about it.
We are willing to sacrifice. We're willing to live through renovations. We don't move out unless nobody absolutely has to. And we don't upgrade just because something looks cool or I love it or I saw it on Instagram or Pinterest. We don't change plans mid-project because we saw something online. That discipline is boring. I know it's boring, but boring definitely works and it's gotten us here.
Most people renovate like they're staying forever, but statistically, most people don't stay forever. And when you've renovated purely for yourself, without thought of the exit, assuming you're gonna be there forever, that bill is going to come due and you're gonna pay for it.
And we've seen it happen time and time again. We've watched people get buried in houses. We have watched them take horrible deals just to get out. And we've watched them blame agents, markets, interest rates, when really they just paid for things the market never promised to reimburse.
Real estate is this powerful, wonderful thing that can really create flexibility and options in your life. We were just able to move a family of 11 people from DC to South Carolina because of real estate, but over renovating and not taking into effect the market can really put you in harm's way, can really make it dangerous.